Hey everyone, welcome back. So in the last video we covered the first 5 OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, right? So today we're finishing the rest, diving into the ones that often hide deep inside real-world systems. So from outdated components to weak authentication and poor logging, you name it, right? So we'll see how these flaws can quietly open doors for attackers. So let's get going and wrap up the OWASP top 10 with real examples and lesson you can actually apply right away. So the sixth one is vulnerable and outdated components. Right? So this actually refers to the use of software libraries or frameworks or other dependencies that contain known security flaws or are not are no longer maintained. Right? So these components can expose applications to exploitation if updates or patches are neglected or ignored by the system owner. So the risk arises when an organization or the system owner fail to identify or monitor and update these third-party or open source components used within their system. So let's take an example. Let's say an airline runs unpatched log4j server, right? So specifically, let's see on our Excalibur here. So specifically on log4j. Log4j is basically Java-based login library, right? So it has this version Apache log4j 2.14.1, which was affected by the log4 shell vulnerability, right? With a CVSS score of 10, which is critical. So anyone can go to this vulnerability or to this specific vulnerability and see the details, the description, and things like that, right? So my point here is, so this vulnerability is public, right? Anyone can see it, and attackers can exploit it and gain access to internal system because it is a shell vulnerability at the end of the day. So the airline wasn't compromised because of the custom code. It was indeed compromised because updates were ignored, right? I hope you get that point. So another way to put this is so your security is only as strong as your weakest dependency, right? Meaning, even if you own or a code or system which is well secured, a single vulnerable component you rely on can actually open door for an attacker to attack your system, to compromise your system, right? So this is what vulnerable and an outdated component means in the OWASP top list. So the other one is, or the next one is identification at authentication failure, right? So it's self-explanatory, but this actually occurs when an application incorrectly implements or let's say manage authentication mechanisms. So allowing attackers to assume other users' identities, right? This includes, like, for example, weak passwords, policies, missing multi-factor authentication, insecure session handling. So such weaknesses can lead to unauthorized access and data breaches and full account compromise, right? So, like, for example, the airline might allow weak passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It might not have an MFA or no account lockout mechanism or even no rate limiting in place, right? So the message is clear, right? So weak authentication turns legitimate users into weak target, right, or easy targets, right? So this is the seventh one, and let's go to the eighth one, which is software and data integrity failures. So what if, let's say, what if the software update that you trust becomes an attack itself, right? So software and data integrity failures happen when the code or update we rely on are tampered with, or when we trust the sources that aren't properly secured. So can be a recent example can be NPM, where many of us felt directly was the NPM compromise, right? So since the NPM is a package manager most developers use to pull in libraries, attackers were able to sneak malicious code into like packages. And what did the vulnerability do? Well, it allowed attackers to run harmful scripts during installation, meaning anyone who downloaded that affected package could have their system exposed without even realizing it, right? So the message is clear. So always we have to verify our dependencies using or use signed packages, or keep an eye on the supply chain security, because one weak link in the chain can put the whole system at risk, right? So supply chain attack via trusted vendor. So we saw how NPM vulnerability could lead to system compromise, right? So trust itself can become the attack vector sometimes. So this is what software and data integrity failure means. So the other one is security logging and monitoring failure, right? So this occurs when applications do not properly record or detect or respond to security relevant events, right? Including but not limited to missing or incomplete logs, lack of alerting system, or failure to monitor suspicious activities, you name it. So without effective logging and monitoring, an attacker can go unnoticed, or delaying detection and response, and allowing an attacker to maintain persistence, right? Or cover their ticket, tracks, for example, right? So, for example, another example can be an attacker gains access to the airline system, and they might remain inside for 6 months, right? They access passenger information, internal document, nobody notices, right? Why? Because there are no logs, no monitoring, no alerts. So detection is actually as important as prevention, right? And this is what security logging and monitoring failure um, looks like. And the last but not the least one is server-side request forgery. So simply put, it is a web security vulnerability where an attacker tricks a server into making an unintended request to internal or external systems, right? For example, server fetches from attacker controlled URLs, or access and then access to internal systems or services behind the firewall, or cloud credential theft via metadata endpoint that actually see what SSRF looks like in this image. So here the attacker first requests or sends malicious URL to the vulnerable web application, for example, a form that fetches images or data from user-specified links, right? And then the server will make a request. Instead of the browser fetching the link, the server itself makes the request, because the server has access to internal networks, right? And the attacker can trick into connecting to internal or restricted systems, for example, localhost /admin, for example, or cloud metadata here, right? And then after that, the vulnerable server unknowingly sends the request to the internal server, right? Or cloud instance, bypassing the firewall and exposing sensitive data. And then after that, data exfiltration comes in, where the server returns to the attacker, leaking internal files, credentials, or or configuration data, right? So, um, so having said this about the SSRF, that is actually it for our OWASP top 10. And yeah, so guys, in the next videos we'll be covering the OWASP top 10, the most critical web application security risks, but this time I will build a realistic vulnerable app so we can see each of these flaws that we just saw in the past two videos, and then we will deep dive into how attackers can actually exploit them and how we can actually defend against them. So stick around because this series will take us step by step through the real exploits and real fixes. So see you guys next time. Thank you so much for your time. See you.